All right, we're back on the Lag Bros channel here with our two 2022 KLX300Rs. We're doing a works connection hour meter install today. We've got it all installed on this bike. Nice clean install. We're going to do the same thing on this next bike. Give you an idea of what we did and just how to get it all tucked away nice and the easiest way to do stuff. Give you a quick rundown on what I used, what you might need. You might do things a little differently. We got the works connection hour meter and the bracket to install it. I'm not a big fan of using double-sided tape on anything, and they make that pretty trick little bracket there that bolts on, I think, with any 6mm bolt. I use zip ties, something to cut the zip ties, something to measure with, ratchet with an 8mm, metric Allen wrenches, and some zip ties, electrical tape, that kind of stuff, real basic. I'll get the camera set up and we'll get going. Alright, if you want to do this the quickest, easiest way possible and have the cleanest install, the best thing to do is just go ahead and get the seat and the plastics off the left side of the bike. That'll give you access to everything inside. Won't be such a pain to route that wire and make the wraps on the spark plug wire like they show in the works connection instructions. There's not a lot of instructions that come with a works connection unit, but there doesn't need to be. It's a pretty basic install. So some of these bolts in this bike are metric Allens, and others are just an 8mm bolt. I believe it's an 8mm. Yes. These bolts on this gas tank shroud, they are different lengths. Just keep track of what's what on here. And these two bolts in the front, they also hold the radiator shroud in place. So just keep an eye on those. Those are different bolts than the rest. They have shoulders on them to keep that all aligned. So that's the easiest way to get all that off. Quickest, fastest way. I'll show you what we have going on here. The kit for works connection has a bolt that comes with it to replace a bolt, say on your gas tank mount, or up maybe by the number plate, which there isn't really room on this bike. On the gas tank bolt, the works connection bolt that's included isn't long enough, so you can just reuse the stock bolt. But that's where we're going to mount that today. That allows you to leave the wiring harness on on the frame side of the bike instead of on the fork side, so you don't have to worry about wires chafing or moving too much as you ride. And we're going to route that wire right down to this main harness that comes here under the frame, and here's the spark plug wire, and that's where you're going to make your wraps like they show in the manual. Basically, there's a red lead on that wire, and you have to put 5 wraps on this. This is a separate coil. They have separate instructions for a coil in cap or a separate coil. This bike has the separate coil, so we can just wrap it here between the coil and the spark plug. So we'll go ahead and get going on that. I'll pull the works connection stuff out, and like I said, basically, you know, this kit comes with an extra bolt for mounting the bracket. But I just reused the stock one and made sure to Loctite it. I also Loctited these bolts to mount the actual unit. You get a little decal and stuff in there. Get a decal with this one as well, and a bunch of extra wire. And this one, they come set. There's a pulse per revolution that has to be set on these. They come set from the factory at 0.5. These bikes need to be set to 1. That's pretty easy to change right on the meter itself. There's only one button. You just follow the instructions. It's super easy. But I'll go ahead and get installing this. All right, the first thing I did on the other bike was I pulled the gas tank mount bolt here up front. Like I say, I just reused this stock bolt. So I just sent the bolt through the bracket, and then you have to keep the washer for the rubber grommet on the gas tank mount. I'm going to throw a little blue Loctite on that, just so it doesn't go anywhere. Then just make sure you straighten it up and try to hold it nice and straight as you tighten this down. And next I went ahead and, like I say, the kit comes with these bolts with little O-rings on them. They mount right through here. So I'm going to stick those in, and we'll Loctite those as well. Get that mounted up. So here's what the bracket looks like before I get too far ahead of myself. Like I said, just make sure it's nice and straight. It's a really nice little bracket. Aluminum. Should hold up good. Now these, especially with a Loctite, they don't really need to be torqued down too crazy. I would assume that you could probably pretty easily crack this plastic housing if you weren't careful. That might be some of the reason they have the O-rings, just for vibration reasons, and just so you don't destroy the plastic. Okay, now Works Connection gives you a ton of wire on this. You can just bundle it up somewhere on the bike and hide it. I didn't want to do that. I don't like having any extra wire on the bike that I don't have to have. So I called Works Connection directly and asked them about trimming the wire. They said they recommend you do not trim it. That being said, you can trim it. Just keep in mind that if you do, that's it. If you cut it too short, you're done. You're buying a new meter, because if you go to tie back into this wire, if you cut it too short and tried to splice it, it would mess with the resistivity in the circuit, I'm assuming is what they were trying to tell me, and basically your hour meter wouldn't work correctly. So for now, I just pulled this wire, comes out on the right side, and I just looped it back underneath the front of the tank, and then I'm going to run it right through this next little wire holder here, frame mount on the bike. I'm trying to do this one-handed so I can show you. Oops, sent that through backwards. Knotted it up. And the next place I sent it was through this. There's a little plastic clip here on the bike from the factory. I'm going to send it right through that. Now obviously this is pretty close to the top of the radiator. These other wires are in protective sleeves. So when I install this, I'm going to make sure that this wire gets zip tied, you know, right above this other one so it doesn't get too hot, but also out of the way of any place it could chafe. And here's where I kind of measured up, you know, where I wanted my wraps to happen on the spark plug wire, like they show in the instructions. I want them to happen, you know, somewhere right here. I want to leave a little bit of slack in the wire so that way it's not, you know, chafing or pulling hard anywhere and going to cause issues later on down the road. But you've got to have room for 5 wraps down here on this. And I just measured it up quick. Basically, you need about 150 millimeters of the red wire showing on this to do that. So I made a couple marks on it, and then I trimmed it just with some regular wire stripping pliers and did it that way. So I'll show you what I did there. So basically all I did for this is I held it up here where I wanted my wire to sit, keeping in mind, you know, to leave slack and everything. And like I say, it was 150 millimeters. I know I'm in the US and using metric, but we should all be using metric, to be honest with you. Especially on a metric bike, it's a little easier. And measure twice, cut once, because you only get one shot at this. I did it once before, so I'm not really all that worried about it. So what I did was I cut right through both wires, the black and the red. And then I'm using a 12 to 14 gauge size stripper. Yours may be different. Just kind of carefully worked my way around that black casing, making sure not to cut into the red inner core of the wire. Pull it back a little bit and then just ease it off. And there you go, you're right back to basically what they had from the factory. Just a nice clean setup. A lot shorter and no extra wire to gob up on the bike somewhere. Just lets the chafe and get caught. Now Works Connection recommended on this style of bike using a zip tie to fasten the wire lead. I didn't really like that. There was no way to hold it very well, to hold those wraps where they need to be. You want those wraps nice and tight on this wire. So I'll try to show you that before I tape it. It's going to be a little difficult to do. They said 5 wraps. You know, in this case, a little more, a little less probably won't hurt. The big thing is just making sure that they're nice, clean wraps. You're not crisscrossing it. They're nice and tight. I'll show you that. So basically, you know, I don't know if I can show you one-handed here. I'm going to try. You know, I'm going to tape this, and I just make sure the wraps are nice and tight like that. And I'm going to throw a band of electrical tape around that, keep those wraps nice and tight, and then I'm going to zip tie it as well. But I'll start right now with the electrical tape, and then I'll get this thing zip tied up in place, and then that's pretty much it. Just a small piece of electrical tape is really all you need. You don't have to get crazy with anything. Like I say, less getting all less to get all tangled up and everything is better, especially when you're going to be off in the weeds and the brush and everything on a trail bike. Just grab a few zip ties here. And I threw a zip tie just above the coils on this, just so this wouldn't slide around if it ever got yanked on. So in the end, that's what that ended up looking like. So nice tight coils, got it wrapped up, just to hold them in place, and then get that zip tie on, and that should be good for a long time. Now, like I said, I'm just gonna run this wire on top of this other harness. Might be hard to see with a shadow. I'm gonna get it sitting on top anywhere it won't chafe and get it away from the heat. Just make sure I keep slack a little bit everywhere and get it zip tied up. Now I've got little 4-inch zip ties that I'm using up. You know, you don't need monster zip ties for this, obviously. A little longer would be nicer. These 4-inch ones are a little hard to work with in this tight area. I made the connection up top, slid them down past the radiator. We don't have to try to get your fingers in that tiny area. And I just leave everything loose until I'm ready to zip tie it finally. Just make sure you're not putting any tension on, you know, the hour meter itself. You know, the spark plug wire and all of that. Just make sure that you're, like I say, leaving a little bit of slack, a little bit of wiggle room everywhere. All right, and for zip ties, I just had the one down on the spark plug like I showed you, right on the spark plug wire. I had a second here on that wiring loom, and you know, a third here and a fourth here. It's nothing too crazy. I'll trim those ends off and throw the plastics on. Whenever I put plastics back on, I just try to be methodical about it, whichever way they came off. It's easiest on this one if you kind of get this the radiator shroud back in place, get that set where it belongs, and then just get a couple in there to hold it. I leave everything loose till I get it set where I want it, because these plastics have slotted holes so they can, you know, they kind of move around. So the 3 shortest bolts go right here, 2 in the tank and this one down here. Then the longer bolt goes here. And the 2 bolts with the shoulders go on the radiator shrouds. You just kind of snug these and make sure, you know, that shoulder's holding everything where it should be. You don't want to pinch anything all weird in there. This may seem pretty basic to a lot of you, but this is kind of for anybody that maybe has or hasn't ever done it. I like to snug these radiator shrouds right up first. Make sure everything's lined up. Then I kind of held this one in place against the tank a little bit. It moves around. I just snugged it up against the tank and tighten these ones back down. And the side plastics have a series of notches on them that just engage with this piece. Then this is one of the Allen head bolts that goes in here. Make sure you don't lose the washers on those ones either. Sometimes they stick to the rubber on these grommets, so just make sure you're watching that. They should have a washer with them. And lastly, the seat, again basic, but just make sure that you're notched into the notch on the tank. Slide it forward, pop that in place. These bolts can start a little funny, so I found it easy. It's just to hold down on the seat and wiggle it around to get those started. I just keep pressure on the seat while I tighten these down. That's pretty much it. Now I'll go through and get the clock set on this, but as you can see, it's just like the other bike now, all set up nice and clean. These are pretty neat. They have a clock, hour meter, maintenance hour meter that you can reset, you know, a tachometer. It'll also show you your highest RPM for your ride at the end of every ride. So that's pretty much it. So there's the hour meters on the two bikes, and got some more stuff coming. Got a whole bunch of goodies coming today, including some exhaust and stuff. So we're going to try to do those videos, continue with our exhaust tests on these, and try to get rid of that hot muffler issue. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you posted.